Every culture needs its own epic tale. The Iliad, the Epic of Gilgamesh, and today we will talk about the epic tale of Finland and Karelia. The epic is called Kalevala, and it is different from the other epic tales because it was never actually passed down as a singular text through generations and centuries. It was composed out of different pieces from different villages and actually from different people, so it was made into a proper epic tale in the 19th century. First, it is important to understand where it actually came from. So Kalevala is a compilation of mythologies of the Finno-Ugric people. Those are the people who live in modern Finland, Estonia, Karelia, obviously parts of Russia and parts of Finland, because Karelia is divided between the two countries. So this is a combination of mythologies of pretty different people as of today. Originally, all of these people, connected by similar languages, had more or less similar understanding of how the world was created and how it functions in the sense of spirituality. So they saw the world as being divided into three parts. The middle part is the one for the living. This is the world that we live in. It is populated both by people and by divine creatures, by some kind of monsters, demons, spirits, everything that every proper mythology should have in its world. Then the heavens are for the gods, and the underworld is for the dead. The axis of the whole thing connected the North Star to the ground, to an object that I will speak later about called Sampo, that is inside the ground, sort of. And the underworld also is separated from the middle ground by a river that one has to cross to get into the world of the dead. We don't actually know much about how the Finno-Ugric people imagined their gods to relate to the middle world of the living. We don't know much, unfortunately, because when Christianity came and when the overall oppression of the Finnish culture came, the ideas and the religious practices have been destroyed, or at least kind of suppressed, to the point where it is very difficult now to find any proper information about the rituals and the prayers and maybe the myths that were popular at the time. We know a few of the gods that were in the Finno-Ugric pantheon. We know that one of them probably was called Perkele, which is now a swear word in Finland, and that very likely happened when the Christians came and decided that the name for the devil is now going to be the name of the former god of storm and lightning. Every proper mythology has the main god of storm and lightning, and that god was Perkele. Now he's called Ukko, which is kind of the name for the thunderstorms in Finnish language as well. There was no myth of the end of the world, of a new cycle beginning, or of a better world where everyone becomes god, or anything like that. At least we don't know about it as of today. We surprisingly know more about the lower mythology than we know of gods and bigger divine things. Lower mythology is what you usually would find in a fairy tale. It is sea monsters, it is spirits, it's some kind of little creatures who maybe live in the forests, and those tend to survive in cultures that have been oppressed for a long time, because they are the stories that are passed mostly from grandmas to children, and that is never seen by the oppressors as a religion, so it is never forbidden. It is rarely persecuted in the way that is a proper former religion of the oppressed land. So we know that the Finno-Ugric people had different kinds of funny myths about animals, and they believed that sometimes the souls of people lived in different birds and in different little creatures. For example, you couldn't kill frogs because they were once people and might become people again. There was also an interesting idea about spiders. Spiders were sentient to the point where you had to give them teeth to probably keep them away or something. I don't know what would happen if you stop giving spiders teeth. Maybe we will find out someday. And my favorite one is about snakes, who were believed to have the kind of public gatherings and hearings once a year where they planned. What did they plan, though? Who knows? We should ask the snakes about that. So this whole mess was kind of in this state by 19th century, when Finland was still part of Russia, and the Finnish culture and the Finnish language was not really studied well enough, not developed well enough, and there was very little to support the national identity and national idea of the Finnish people. So this enthusiast by the name of Elias Lönnrot, who was actually a scientist and a physicist, and also in his spare time apparently a poet, decided that he would create a proper structure of the Finnish mythology. And he traveled for a long time. He made like 11 trips on foot through villages of Karelia, and he gathered all of this kind of scattered around myths that never had a proper sequence. No one ever told him this is the first myth, this is the second, this is how it ends, and he tried to the best of his ability to put the thing together to create a full national epic, and that epic became Kalevala. I will just show you the structure. The structure is kind of 50 runot, they're called in Finnish. In English, they're usually called just folk stories, which doesn't sound that cool because runo is a poem that is supposed to be sang specifically, and it has a very special rhythm to it, which you will learn to recognize very quickly. So the Kalevala consists of 50 of those runot, and each one tells a short story about some kind of adventure of a certain character. There is 3 main heroes in this whole story. They're Väinämöinen, Lemminkäinen, and Ilmarinen. And all of them are, in some of the Baltic traditions, considered to be the sons of Kalev. In Kalevala, Kalev doesn't actually appear, unlike in the Estonian mythology, but he is considered to be the maybe father of all the gods or father of all the heroes, very ambiguous as of what he really is, but that's where Kalevala gets its name. It's the story of the sons of Kalev. The whole idea of Kalevala, at least according to Lönnrot, is that these 3 heroes and some of the less important characters live in the same country, the good country of Kalevala, and they have the opposing force, the northern evil country of Pohjola, and they go on different adventures fighting that evil country and eventually creating the proper world for themselves. The whole thing begins from the creation of the world, and the creation happens thanks to Ilmatar. Ilmatar is the goddess, and she is the daughter of air, and when she was first created there was nothing in the world, just endless dark sea, and Ilmatar was floating in that sea for centuries, and she was with child at the time, so that was like the longest pregnancy in the history of the world. And after a while she became very upset that she's been pregnant for 300-400 years. That was, I can imagine, not a very nice state of being. And then Ilmatar saw a duck flying around and looking for a place to lay her eggs. The duck chose Ilmatar's knee to do that, and she laid the eggs on that knee. They stayed there for maybe 3 days, and Ilmatar eventually became tired of holding her knee in a certain position, so she shook the knee, the eggs fell down, cracked open, and the pieces of the eggs created everything. They created the stars and the moon and the islands and land, and so the world has been created. Still, Ilmatar was having issues. She was still pregnant with Väinämöinen, who was becoming increasingly irritated by being inside of his mom for 300 years. He was already an old man, and he still couldn't even see the world that was now around him. He prayed to the gods and he prayed to the moon to let him out, but they never listened, so he had to do it himself. So this is the horror of giving birth. Burst he then the outer portals of his dark and dismal fortress. With his strong but unnamed finger opens he the lock resisting. With the toes upon his left foot, with the fingers of his right hand, creeps he through the yielding portals of the threshold of his dwelling. On his knees across the threshold, throws himself head foremost forward, plunges into deep of oceans, plunges hither, plunges thither, turning with his hands the water, swims he northward, swims he southward, etc., etc. He sees the world. That's how he gets born. Ilmatar is presumably relieved by being, rid of this 300-year-old fetus, but now Väinämöinen becomes the first person in the world, and he sets to creating forests and plants, and he tries to populate this earth, and at first it doesn't really go according to plan. He manages to grow some trees, and he manages to grow some flowers, but none of them give any fruit, so this whole system cannot properly reproduce. And he calls upon the gods to help him, and eventually discovers with their help that it is very important to put some ashes on the ground to be able to grow plants that are able to reproduce. So he burns down the whole forests, except for one birch that he leaves for the eagle to be able to sit on. The eagle is very grateful and then helps with this deforestation process to regrow the trees. After that, when the new forest is regrown from the ashes, everything goes smoothly and the ecosystem starts working on its own. And Väinämöinen becomes the person. He is the one who created everything. He's the one who made all the plants and all the trees. Everyone is very fond of him. He goes around singing songs. He's now the main hero and the main god of this whole system. Somewhere further in the north, a young boy named Joukahainen hears about Väinämöinen's fame and decides that he can beat Väinämöinen in the kind of a rap battle. He's like, I'm gonna go there, I'm gonna sing, and it's gonna be much better than this old wise guy who created everything. Joukahainen's mom is not very fond of this idea. She tells him Väinämöinen is much older and much wiser than Joukahainen, and she strongly advises against this stupid idea. Joukahainen doesn't listen, as most teenagers do, and seeks out Väinämöinen and calls him to a singing battle, and essentially just tells him that he knows better about the creation of the world and about the making of trees and forests. Väinämöinen is obviously not impressed because he was there and he was the person who did all of this. So with his magical singing, he puts Joukahainen in the ground, like up to his shoulders. So Joukahainen is stuck, and that's when he starts to panic. So he offers Väinämöinen everything that he has, all the riches, all the trinkets that he might have acquired by his teenage years. Väinämöinen doesn't need any of that. He has all the important stuff he needs at home. So Joukahainen resorts to the last important thing that he has. He offers Väinämöinen his sister. His sister name is Aino, and she is this beautiful young maiden, and Väinämöinen, being the old bearded guy that he is obviously ecstatic. He's like, oh yes, I am gonna marry that girl. So he lets Joukahainen go. Joukahainen comes home, says, I didn't win the rap battle. I also sold my sister to Väinämöinen, apparently. His parents are surprisingly not upset. Väinämöinen is very famous, he's wise, he's a cool guy, so they say, yeah, that's a good idea, let's marry our daughter off to Väinämöinen. Aino is the one who is not very happy. She cries for days. She pleads to her mother to not let her go. Mom dismisses her concerns. So eventually, after meeting Väinämöinen in the forest and seeing for herself how old and unpleasant he is, she decides that there is nothing left for her in the world, and she goes out to a lake where she sees some water spirits playing, and she decides to join them and sinks and stays in the lake forever. Her mom is very remorseful of this. This is a very sad speech that she gives, but I think it's very impressive for the time when this was written. So she warns other parents against forcing their children into marriage. She says, "Listen, all ye mothers, listen. Learn from me a tale of wisdom. Never urge unwilling daughters from the dwellings of their fathers to the bridegrooms that they love not. Not as I, unhuman mother, drove away my lovely Aino, fairest daughter of the Northland." So she is remorseful, but it is too late. And Väinämöinen goes to the lake and he's fishing there, and he catches this beautiful fish with a very kind of uncanny human-looking face. He doesn't think much of it. He decides to cut it up and, I don't know, make some soup with it. But the fish jumps back into the water and speaks to him in a human voice, saying that she is Aino, and she was hoping for him to recognize that she is not an ordinary fish. But since he didn't, now she will disappear forever. He tries to catch her again. He stays fishing at the lake for a long time, but the Aino fish never comes back. So Väinämöinen decides to find himself a different bride. It doesn't seem like he's very upset with the whole thing. His mother advises him to go to Pohjola, neighboring country that Kalevala is constantly in a bit of a conflict with, saying that the most beautiful young girl of the whole world is actually there, the daughter of Louhi, of the ruler of that land. And Väinämöinen goes. Joukahainen, at the same time, the brother who sold Aino to Väinämöinen and therefore was the reason why she killed herself, is very upset, and he blames Väinämöinen for everything that has happened, and he decides to take his revenge and kill him. So Joukahainen makes a magical crossbow, and he waits for Väinämöinen to pass by and shoots him. He doesn't get Väinämöinen himself, but he shoots the horse, and Väinämöinen falls into cold waters where he's fighting for his life for like 8 days until he is saved by that eagle, who was still very grateful for Väinämöinen leaving him a birch to rest on when he was doing the whole forest thing. And the eagle brings Väinämöinen to Pohjola, where this old lady named Louhi, who is the ruler of the land, helps with all of his injuries and asks why did he come here. He says that he was actually meaning to go to Pohjola with all of these problems along the way. He got exactly where he wanted to be because he is intending to marry the daughter of Louhi. Louhi says that she will only give her daughter to the man who creates Sampo. The task is as unclear for Väinämöinen as it must have been for you right now when you heard it. Nobody knows what Sampo is. It is only said that it must be forged. So Väinämöinen actually decides that he will bring his brother, who is a smith, and ask him to make the Sampo. So he goes on the back trip to get his brother Ilmarinen, and while he is riding away from Pohjola, he sees this beautiful rainbow and an even more beautiful lady sitting on top of that rainbow. That's actually the girl that he is trying to marry, and he decides to ask her if she would like to be his bride. And she is just like her mother. She gives him a whole bunch of different tasks, all of them getting more and more ridiculous. She asks him to cut just one strand of hair with a very dull knife. She asks him to make a knot out of an egg, etc., etc. It is actually never explained how he does all of those things, which is quite funny when compared to the other popular mythologies. Usually when you find a hero in this kind of situation, he suddenly shows amazing feat of intelligence where he's like, yes, I'm gonna trick this person and I'm gonna fulfill the task in a very smart way. But Väinämöinen just says, yeah, I can do that, and he just ties the egg or cuts the hair, and it's never explained how. He's just very, very cool. But eventually the last task that she gives him is to make a boat and to put it into the water without touching it. Väinämöinen is like, yeah, that's not a problem for me. He starts making the boat, but the evil spirit of Hiisi, who apparently lives in the forest and can compel different animals and plants to do things for him, makes the axe that Väinämöinen is working with kind of jump forward and hit the shin of Väinämöinen, and Väinämöinen starts bleeding, and he doesn't know the spells that could heal this kind of wound, because the wound is inflicted by iron from the axe. So he goes around the villages in Pohjola asking people if there is anyone who knows the specific spell for the iron. I guess at this point it is important to mention that the real Finno-Ugric tradition, the religion tradition, is based upon this idea of words. They are literally in Finnish called sanot, words or lyrics maybe. Those are a huge part of any shamanism culture. And they are not exactly prayers to God. They are the songs of how things function. They are explanations more than anything. So if you want to control the water, for example, you have to kind of tell the water what it is, how it's been created, how it functions, what it does on a daily basis, etc. And that knowledge gives you the right to control something. And that goes to all the elements and all the gods. It is kind of similar in the Egyptian mythology, where you have to know the name of the god to be able to have some sort of control over that god. So Väinämöinen just doesn't know anything about iron, which is why he needs someone who can sing about the iron to control the wound that's been inflicted by the iron. Finally, he found this old guy who saw the process of creation of iron. So he tells this wonderful story how iron was first hiding in the swamps because it was afraid of the fire, its distant cousin or something, until Ilmarinen, the smith of the land, came and convinced the iron that fire is not to be afraid of and that he can actually bind the two together to make something beautiful. So he gets the iron and starts, well, hitting it with a hammer, and this is the moment when iron understands that it's been kind of fooled, and Ilmarinen forces the iron to promise that it would never hurt anyone, that it will never kill anyone, and that it will never inflict any wounds on people. And after the iron has sworn, Ilmarinen decides to put some honey over it and asks a bee to bring that honey. But Hisi, the evil spirit of the forest, hears this conversation, and instead of a nice bee, he sends a hornet that brings all kinds of poison to Ilmarinen. The poison from frogs, I don't know what kind of poisonous frogs are there in Finland, but okay. Poison from frogs, from snakes, from spiders, everything combined. Ilmarinen, not suspecting anything wrong, puts all of that poison on the iron, and that's the moment when iron becomes evil. It forgets the oath that it has sworn to not hurt anyone, and from that point it can inflict wounds upon people. After this whole story is presented to the wound finally listens to the spells and closes up on itself. Väinämöinen reaches Ilmarinen, his brother, and says, let's go to Pohjola, there is this beautiful maiden that's promised to anyone who can make sampo. Ilmarinen is completely not impressed. He's like, yeah, I don't really care. Then Väinämöinen has to offer him something better. He says, did you know that the tallest pine in the world is in Pohjola? And Ilmarinen is blown away. He's like, oh yes, we are going there. So they go on this little adventure trip where they look at the tallest pine in the world, and it actually touches the moon, and they are very impressed. And then they reach Pohjola, kind of as an afterthought, and that's where Ilmarinen forges sampo. It is very unclear what sampo really is. It probably looks something like a small windmill, but it also has roots that grow and connected into the ground, and that is also the artifact that is connected by the axis to the North Pole and holds the world together. But then it can also create flour and money and salt. So yeah, you can imagine it however you want. No one ever really drew it properly in any kind of specific way, but this main artifact of the whole mythology is created, and well, this is kind of the end of the cycle of Ilmarinen and Väinämöinen for a bit. They don't get the bride. Louhi just says, yeah, I will send her later. Bye, guys. And she keeps the incredible wealth-making mill to herself and locks it into a cave. And Väinämöinen and Ilmarinen go back to their land and just hang out. This is where Lönnrot shifts our attention to the third hero of the whole saga. That's Lemminkainen. Lemminkainen lives on an island with his mom, and he is mostly interested in girls. He is young, he is a cool kind of arrogant hero, and he decides that he wants the most beautiful bride in the world. He doesn't know about the daughter of Louhi yet, and he hears that the most beautiful girl he can find is Kyllikki. So he goes to the village where she's from and essentially forgets that he was there for Kyllikki because all the other maidens are very fond of him. So he spends a while working there and annoying the husbands of the beautiful girls in the village. Eventually it all becomes too much. He remembers that he was supposed to get Kyllikki's attention, and he can only muster enough time to steal her. So after this kidnapping, he gets back to his hometown, and on the way him and Kyllikki kind of figure out that they actually like each other, and she's not upset that he has kidnapped her. And by the time they reach his home, she's very willing to be his wife. The only condition that he sets is that she is not to go into the village to dance with other men while Lemminkainen is away for work. After a while, Kyllikki grows bored and decides to break the promise that she's made, goes out to the village, dances with the guys there. Lemminkainen is very upset and decides that now he needs a new wife, and that wife, of course, has to be the daughter of Louhi. There was just two beautiful girls in the whole world at the time, the Kyllikki and the daughter of Louhi. She doesn't have a name. It's not that I'm not telling you. She really doesn't have a name. She's just beautiful and she sits on a rainbow. So Lemminkainen tells his mom, I'm gonna go and I'm gonna get this beautiful girl from Pohjola. His mom is wise and old, and she's aware that Pohjola is a very dangerous place, and that her son is not the most level-headed person in the world, so she begs him not to go. He says, Mom, it's okay. You will always know if something is wrong with me, because I will leave you this hair comb, and if it bleeds, you will know I'm dead. And she's like, yeah, sounds wonderful. That's safety. So after he has given her this incredible location finding device, he goes to Pohjola. In Pohjola, Louhi also gives him the tasks that one must fulfill before marrying the daughter of Louhi. So probably she's already forgotten that Ilmarinen made Sampo to marry her daughter, and she orders Lemminkainen to first hunt a moose, then a horse, and then a swan. All of those are compelled by the Hisi spirit, of course, to be way faster and way angrier than any normal animal. But the first two Lemminkainen catches easily. The swan, though, lives in that river that connects the world of the dead to the world of the living. So he has to go down to Tuonela, the land of the dead. And when he is traveling there, he sees a whole bunch of people on his way. He's very afraid that they are wizards and magicians and that they will harm him in some way. So he puts his spells on them first, just to kind of freeze them for a bit. The only person that he decides not to freeze is this very old man. Lemminkainen thinks that the man is of no danger to anyone because he is old and weak, and it just so happens that the man was actually the guardian of the river to Tuonela. So he's very offended by this underestimation from Lemminkainen, and when Lemminkainen comes to hunt the swan, the man takes a snake and makes the snake very straight and very sharp and throws it as a spear and pierces Lemminkainen's heart. And then, after he's dead, he cuts him into pieces and throws the pieces into the lake. That's when the hair comb starts bleeding, and Lemminkainen's mom knows that her son is dead. She searches for him for a while until the sun rays point the river to her where the pieces of her son are. She gathers the pieces, she puts them back together, and she prays for Lemminkainen to come back, and miraculously he does. So this is kind of the end of the story. She takes him home, she tells him, I told you so, and then the stories of our three main heroes kind of wrap up. Now all of them have some kind of claim on the daughter of Louhi. They've all tried on different levels of success to fulfill the tasks that were given. And after not getting her as their bride, they all independently decide to come to Louhi and say that she's in the wrong and she needs to finally give her daughter to marry someone at least. So Väinämöinen and Ilmarinen travel, one of them by the land, one of them by the sea, to Pohjola, and there they meet Louhi and say, finally, we need to know who will be the husband of your daughter. The daughter decides that she wants Ilmarinen to be her husband. Sounds fair after the creation of Sampo, but also he's like this young, muscular smith, and Väinämöinen is like 300 years old and has a long beard, so he's looking kind of Gandalf, Dumbledore sort of thing. So, yeah, no one would probably judge her for that. Väinämöinen goes on a long rant. It's a whole separate song where he complains about the unfair competition between the old men and the young men, and how the old men should be aware that women don't value anything but the good looks, and just kind of sulks in the corner for a bit. Ilmarinen, though, gets to marry the daughter of Louhi after completing a few more tasks, because Sampo wasn't enough, and the marriage is an incredibly sad affair. If you've ever heard about the mentality of the Finns and how they are unfriendly, or how they have this kind of stone faces, or how they are not the party animals that the rest of the world is, this is the perfect example. They have a wedding where for multiple runos they just explain to the bride how miserable her life is going to be when she is married to Ilmarinen. If you look at the short summary of Runo 22, it just says that the bride is first very concerned, then she is being led to tears, and then she's crying, and then they are consoling her, which doesn't sound like the perfect wedding to me. You should hear what they are telling her. They tell her, happy in her home the maiden, happy at her father's fireside, like the master in his mansion, happy with her bows and arrows. This not thus with married women. Brides of heroes may be likened to the prisoners of Moskva, held in bondage by their masters. As a wife must weep in labor, carry trouble on both shoulders. When the next hour passes over, thou must tend the fire and oven, must prepare thy husband's dinner, must direct thy master's servants. When thine evening meal is ready, thou must search for hidden wisdom in the brain of perch and salmon, etc. They tell her that she would be as the slave in her husband's home, that he would hit her, that his parents would not like her from the very beginning, because she doesn't know how to do things in the new home as well as the daughters of that home do. And they tell her, weep, oh weep, my lovely maiden, when thou weepest, weep in earnest, weep great rivers from thine eyelids, and etc. They encourage her to cry. They spend a long time telling her the stories of unhappy women and unhappy men in different marriages, and how things turned out horribly for them. So she is hysterical by the end of this. She's really crying. Then they tell her, don't worry, we will give really good advice to the both of you. And some parts of that advice, for the time being, are actually pretty good. They tell the bride and the groom to listen to each other, to understand each other's needs, and then they advise the husband to not resort to hitting his wife right away, try to talk to her first, and then beat her just a little bit, and then a little bit more, and then if she still doesn't listen, then a bit more again. That's interesting, to say the least. So they advise the groom to only resort to properly beating his wife as the very last mean, and then also do it in secret. They say, do not conquer her in public, lest the villagers should see thee, lest the neighbors hear her weeping, and the forests learn thy troubles. Touch thy wife upon the shoulders, let her stiffened back be softened. Do not touch her on the forehead, nor upon her ears, nor visage. Of a reach be on her forehead, or a blue mark on her eyelids. Then her mother would perceive it, and her father would take notice, and the village workmen see it, and the village woman ask her. So the whole thing is just try not to leave visible bruises. So good times. After that, when the groom and the wife are, or groom and the bride are consoled and set on their way to their beautiful married life, Lemminkainen arrives. Apparently, he knew that he's not been summoned for the wedding as the troublemaker of the land. Nobody wanted him there, and he is very upset. On his way to Pohjola, he encounters a few different fiery monsters. He sees a whole lake of fire, actually, that the god Ukko helps him cross. And by the time when he arrives, the wedding is already over. He's very upset and he kills the husband of Louhi, which was not a very good idea. So Lemminkainen, fearing the revenge of the man of Pohjola, turns into an eagle and flies back home, where he finds his home village destroyed and burned to the ground, and only his mother is still alive. He finds her in a small hut in the forest. He's very happy that she managed to escape the invaders, and she forces him to promise that he would not go into a fight for 10 more years. He breaks that promise very soon, deciding to go and have a proper war with Pohjola after everything that has happened. Now the story is interrupted again to kind of tie together why the rest of the characters decided to join that war against Pohjola thing. So somewhere in the same land there were two brothers, one of them hated the other, killed the brother, killed his wife, killed his children, and only left his youngest son and enslaved that son and tried to force him to do all sorts of labor for him. But the son, whose name was Kullervo, was magical from his birth and was kind of a Herculean sort of hero. He was very, very strong and didn't know how to manage his power. So when he was tasked to babysit a little baby, he ended up ripping the baby's arms off and its legs off. So he was not very fit to be a babysitter. When he was tasked to build a fence, he built a fence that reached the skies and had no entry anywhere. So it was just an impenetrable wall, which was not the goal. When he was asked to cut down a forest, he cut it into little shreds so the wood could not be used anymore for anything. After a while, his uncle / his master decided that he doesn't need such a slave and he wants to sell the boy to someone, and that someone happened to be Ilmarinen and his wife, the daughter of Louhi. They bought the boy and tasked him to be a shepherd of their cows and sheep and the whole flock. And for some reason, which is never explained anywhere, the daughter of Louhi decides that she wants to bully this young slave boy, and when baking a piece of bread for him to take to the fields, she puts a stone into that piece of bread. When Kullervo is cutting the bread, he breaks his knife on the stone, and that knife was the only memory of his father, who was tragically murdered a long time ago. So Kullervo finally decides that this is enough. He's had it. He turns the wild animals of the forest, the bears and the wolves, into sheep and cow. And then she brings them back to the daughter of Louhi, and when she tries to milk one of the cows, it turns into a bear and rips her apart. Ilmarinen is incredibly upset about the whole thing, makes himself a wife made out of gold, tries to bed her, decides that's actually not working, and goes to Pohjola and steals another daughter of Louhi, but she apparently has a really bad temper, so he doesn't like her and turns her into a seagull, and then Louhi hates Ilmarinen and Ilmarinen hates everyone, and Kullervo, after committing this horrible crime, goes back to his homeland and finds out that his parents are actually alive, as well as his sister, but the sister has been missing for a long time. And very happy with his new life, he goes out to the forest to pick up some berries or whatever you might do in the forest, and meets a beautiful girl there, and they fall in love and they have sex, and then it turns out that they are actually brother and sister. That's when Kullervo realizes that nothing in his life can ever go right. His sister kills herself, and Kullervo goes and basically, starts a manslaughter. He massacres his whole uncle's / master's family and then kills himself as well. And that's the end of the tragic story of Kullervo. At that point, Ilmarinen and Lemminkainen both have a beef with Louhi, and Väinämöinen also decides that it's finally the time when they need to get Sampo back, because Pohjola is the wealthiest part of the land, and at the same time it's the land of all the evil spirits, so they decide the whole thing is unfair, and they sail to Pohjola to ask Louhi to give Sampo back. As they are sailing, they catch this huge pikefish, and the jaw of that fish, Väinämöinen turns into kantele. Kantele is the traditional instrument of Finno-Ugric people, and that's usually the instrument that one would use to sing those runos, so Kalevala is supposed to be sang with the use of kantele. And when they come to Pohjola, they ask Louhi if they could maybe share Sampo somehow, but she says no, and she has it locked in a cave and chained to the ground, and it also has 3 roots very deep in the ground, so the heroes have no other choice but to steal it. And they are sailing back to Kalevala when Louhi turned into this horrible kind of bird-human hybrid, follows them, and they have a fight, and Sampo is broken in the process, and each of the characters gets a piece of Sampo, and our characters from Kalevala get the best pieces, the pieces that would bring prosperity and wealth to the land, and Louhi gets one of the worst pieces. So from that day on, Pohjola doesn't have enough wealth, and Kalevala is prospering. After the stealing of Sampo, Louhi becomes very resentful, and she tries to take her revenge on Kalevala. She does a whole bunch of things. She sends an evil bear to Kalevala, which is then just kind of cut into pieces by the heroes in the most horrible manner. She steals the moon and the sun, but Ilmarinen first makes his own sun and moon out of metal, which don't work well enough. He should have learned that from his experiment with Golden Wife. So they get the sun and the moon back, and eventually the whole thing ends with something that probably is not authentic. Around 5% of Kalevala is just completely made up by Lönnrot, and this part is very likely to be one of those, percents, because the whole thing ends with the maiden named Marietta, who is walking around the forest and sees a berry. She eats the berry and becomes pregnant and gives birth to a boy who is promised to be the greatest god on the earth, who is promised to drive away all the old pagan gods of Kalevala and to rule the world forever and ever. That's Jesus Christ. Like, it's never said anywhere explicitly, but that is a Christian end of an authentic mythology. The same thing has happened to the Scandinavian mythology, actually, where, while being transcribed by Christian monks, it also ends with the promise of the proper God coming eventually to save everyone. So here the story also ends with, yes, Kalevala has been living in prosperity for a while, but then after this one true God has been born, Väinämöinen has to flee the land and is never seen again, and now the rule of Jesus begins. So yeah, that part you can take with a pinch of salt, but the rest of it is the best description of the Karelian and Finnish mythology that we have. So I hope you've enjoyed this, and I highly recommend to read the whole thing, because there is a lot more that cannot fit into a short video, and it is very entertaining. Thank you for listening.